Well, hi there, everybody. It's a new season. That means we have to have a new Gary Neville podcast. And we're here, Gary, at the end of the last game of the first round of matches in a stadium with a hubbub. We can still hear if we can actually make ourselves heard over the noise, the celebration that Tottenham, under new management, without Harry Kane, have beaten the champions Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that we were at the first game of the weekend, weren't we? Brentford v Arsenal, we're at the last game of the weekend, and wow, it's been absolutely sensational. I feel enthralled to be watching football again. It's been difficult in the last 18 months for the fans not being allowed in the stadium, for the players playing without fans, for us commentating on it at times. It was a little bit laborious, and we had to put a brave face on, and the players did. But honestly, when they're back in the stadium and you see it like it is today, it's so special. And Tottenham, what would they have been like today without the fans? 15 minutes in, demoralised, quite a warm day, even though the sun wasn't out, it was a warm day. But the fans got them going. That first counter-attack that they had just lifted them a little bit, and they grew in the game. If you said to me after 10 minutes that Tottenham would win that game, they said not a chance. They looked completely out of it. City looked a different world. But Tottenham got better and better. Encouragement. I think that's how you beat a big team. You sort of gain confidence throughout the match. You can't just beat them in the first 10 minutes because they'll come back. City started well, then Tottenham stabilised, then they got a bit of something before half-time, but second half they were the better team and deserved the win in the end.
People like me bang on about bogey grounds. This certainly is for Manchester City. Haven't even scored a goal here and have lost again. And the goal itself was quite an unusual one, not the scorer, an unusual person in Heung-min, but the way it found its way into the net.
Yeah, like I said during commentary, Diaz shouldn't have been there, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have been there from a point of view of some coaches might say play that way, but every time a player cuts inside against Manchester City, the other players usually in the middle come up, and he sort of hung back, whether it's a little bit of fatigue in his legs, not got that sharpness. They did definitely tire a little bit in the second half, Manchester City, but what it meant was that when he swung his leg at it and tried to clear it, Ederson was grounded. I'm not sure he should have been rooted to his ground, should I say. He should have really read that it was going in that far corner. Son in the first half twice had turned down opportunities to drive at people and go and commit players, and looked like Nuno had a word with him at half-time and said, look, to that front three, when you get in near the box, just go for it, cut inside and shoot, whether it be on your left or your right foot. And it was a feature. Moura and Sons and Bergwijn's running really was something that harmed Manchester City, probably after 25 minutes of the game. They just couldn't sustain attacks.
And do you think now 1-0 Champions League final lost, 1-0 Community Shield lost, 1-0 here today lost, no goals, Harry Kane will be on the agenda. Does that make it even more, does it spell it out even more that Manchester City have to push Spurs as hard as they can to try and get across the line?
Well, I think they want him anyway, it's plainly obvious, and I don't think Manchester City have been the type of club that would react off the back of one defeat. But you say there's three now, and it's obvious they need a striker, because Jesus, Torres, they're forwards, and I know that's the way the game's going in terms of sort of flexible forwards, likes of Salah and Mane and Firmino. They move around, and City have got Sterling and Jesus and Mahrez, other players that move across the front line. But I think they need a point, they need something, because in games like today, I think Harry Kane could have been the difference. He would have maybe taken a chance. They would have played it forward more. He'd have demanded that they played quicker.
He might have got his head on a cross.
He may have got his head on the cross. There's a couple of balls that flashed across the box that obviously Manchester City didn't get on the end of. But the thing for me about Manchester City after 15 minutes, it's when I've seen them not at the best, is when they slow the game down and start walking with it and playing at a slow tempo. And I don't know why that is, because fatigue, yes, I get the fact that you might not run as hard, but usually when you're on the ball, you can still be sharp and move around. But they just lost their way after 15, 20 minutes of the match. And Kane will be on the agenda this week. He's been on the agenda all pre-season. Interesting that he wasn't included in the Spurs squad today. I mean, I think, is he the only English player that was in the Euros that hasn't been part of the sort of match day squads that's available to be fit? So, and he would always be here. So something's happening. Whether that means that he's not in the squad today means he is going to go to City, but certainly Daniel Levy, if he wants that 150 million, which is the figure that everyone keeps mentioning, it won't do him any harm today in getting that number if that's what he wants, because City, if they had any doubts before, which they don't, they do need a striker. They've lost Sergio Aguero, one of the best strikers in Premier League history.
Let's work our way forward from where we started. You mentioned earlier the other part of North London. I want to give Brentford some credit in this podcast as well, but the other half of North London couldn't have started worse for Arsenal, could it, at the Community Stadium on Friday night?
No, and the contrast for me, if you just look at, say, for instance, Tanganga today and how he defended and how Sanchez defended, because they got put under a lot of pressure. I think at one point in the game, there were 55% of City's attacks coming down their side, but they were aggressive, they were serious about the defending. They knew they had a really tough job in front of them and they stuck to it, they never shirked it. Arsenal were the complete opposite. I felt every time a ball got played forward into the two Brentford strikers, they didn't really want the fight. And I felt today Tottenham, they rose to the occasion. I know they had the fans in front of them and Arsenal didn't, but that to me was a difference. The second balls, the hunger to win the ball back, the physicality, the ability to defend well one-on-one. And I just thought Arsenal were way off it. I know they were way off it in an attacking sense as well. But the basis of any performance and foundation for any good performance is that you match the other team competitively. And I felt Tottenham did that today and Arsenal didn't on Friday night. It was a struggle for them. Well short in quality as well. Obviously, they like Lacazette and Aubameyang. I did think there was something in Arteta's interview before the game that told me he wasn't too happy with Aubameyang and Lacazette.
Yeah, there might be more to be heard about that.
Yeah, I thought there was something that just tell with that. He didn't really. Usually, if the players are ill, there would be genuine concern from a manager, and he would say, "Well, look, we've got to be, we've lost them on the day of the game, and we wish them both well, but we're not with them because of." But he sort of pushed it away a little bit as if something had gone on, and. That was a blow, losing the two experienced players. But before the game, I felt that the energy of the players coming in might help against Brentford. But they're well short, Arsenal. They really are. They're looking at both teams, North London teams, Tottenham today and Arsenal. I know it's very early and it'll change and they'll get closer and there'll be ups and downs for both. But this Tottenham team looked like it had a spirit about it to be able to dig in. And Nuno's teams for the last 3 years, 2-3 years, have done that at Wolves. So if you can get that hard-to-beat mentality into this team that had at Wolves, I know times they were called pragmatic, but he's got better players going forward here. They could do well, better than we expected this season, Tottenham.
First impressions of Brentford?
Very good. Enjoyed the stadium, enjoyed the manager, enjoyed the spirit of the game, enjoyed everything about the night. Arsenal were perfect opponents for them, but they were tactically very good. And what impressed me about Brentford was the emotion that was in the ground that must have been in the club. The players after the game were talking about all the families being there. You imagine how big an occasion that was. But I thought on the pitch they were cold in terms of how they tactically stuck to what they were going to do. They didn't complicate the game. They were really good in terms of sort of the way they approached it and deserved to win. I think they'll struggle this season in terms of generally because I think they won't have enough quality. But I think they could stay in the league if they maintain that home record and that spirit.
Working our way through the weekend, Manchester United were next up. It was 6-2 against Leeds last season, so 5-1 got a lot of headlines, but was it just a repeat of a fixture that had shown Manchester United in a very good light in the last campaign?
It was a very good performance, but you're right, we were at the 6-2 last year and we loved the game because Leeds, to be fair, seemed like the perfect opponent for Manchester United. They play one-on-one all over the pitch. I thought Manchester United was sharp, they were really good. But they are the perfect opponent for Manchester United at Old Trafford. There's no doubt about that as well. So there's a bit of both. It was an absolute repeat of last year. I think every game that Leeds play in, they make it an interesting watch. It's always intriguing. It's exciting, just the way they play. But it was a good start for Manchester United. I think the way in which they unveiled Varane before the game. Obviously, Sancho coming off the bench. So there is a good feeling about what's happening, obviously, at United at the moment. Leeds, we know what they'll do during the season. They'll go and batter teams 4-0, but they could get done at times and look a little bit messy and all over the place. But I thought it was a good game and a good start for Manchester United, completely different to what's happened to Manchester City today. I know Manchester City will return and they'll come back and they'll get a lot better. I mean, their bench today was outstanding.
350 million.
Yeah, and Manchester United's bench was strong, but it was a good start for the red side of Manchester.
And it was a good start for Chelsea as well, who obviously finished last season with a great flourish. Come now, every time we talk about them as European champions. And it's a fixture that they've done well in it as well, like we talk about Manchester United Leeds against Crystal Palace. But they did the job.
They're going to be serious this season, Chelsea, in the sense that they were last season, but really serious in terms of the Premier League. Lukaku makes them very, very dangerous. I said last week, Pep Guardiola wouldn't sign Romelu Lukaku. You think of a striker being available, City wouldn't have been in for him because he wouldn't suit the way in which the manager has the style and wants to play. He didn't suit Old Trafford. He wouldn't suit Jurgen Klopp. But for Chelsea, he will score a ton of goals. He's perfect for that club. I know he's been there once before, but this time he comes back with maturity, with experience, with hundreds of goals under his belt. And I think that I talk about gold signings where I've got no doubt it will be a success and that he'll do the 20, 25 goals, 30 goals. I've got no doubts with Romelu Lukaku that he will not only, I know he didn't sort of appear yesterday, but he will go into that Chelsea team and make them real challengers for the Premier League title. He's a game changer for them in terms of top four to really pushing Manchester City and Liverpool, and Manchester United obviously who finished second last season in terms of going for that title.
Well, let's talk about Liverpool. It wasn't the toughest fixture for them. They've got a magnificent record at Carrow Road, and Norwich, who faced them actually in their first game when they got promoted before. That
we
was
were
at
there,
Anfield.
weren't we?
We were there, yeah, and it seemed very much of the same. And Mo Salah scored a wonderful goal.
I thought they started well, Norwich, and they played good football, and they sort of could have maybe got a goal or two, but didn't do. And then as soon as Liverpool score, you just see that is the big difference ordinarily between teams that come up from the Championship, that they can have good moments and good periods in games, but then the first chance will come for the big team who've got ice cold finishers, goals to shots ratio that are off the scale, and all of a sudden the game's gone and it's turned. And that's what Liverpool were yesterday. They had to withstand that early 25 minutes away. You think of the old principle of an away team going away from home. We used to say it, get through that first 15, 20 minutes, knock the crowd a little bit, get the goal, and then all of a sudden you can just take control of the match. And Liverpool was a perfect away performance.
Well, Southampton had a perfect away performance for that first 20 minutes and got a goal. But I'm asking you about this game really because of Rafa Benitez being in the Everton dugout and the feeling around the city. There's nothing like a win, as Nuno Espirito Santos found here. Nothing like a win in your first game to get you off and running.
No, like I said in pre-season when he went, there's something about it I don't like. But actually, if you said to me, what does an Everton manager look like? I'd say Rafael Benitez. He gets a good spirit, good organisation. I think he's a little bit more direct, which I think Everton, as much as I love the different styles in the Premier League and certainly the possession style of team, I don't think Everton should ever be that. Their style of play is always, for me, under David Moyes or going back into the 80s when they were champions with Sharp and Gray up front, up and at them, get the ball forward. With Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin up front, there's no reason for them not to play more direct and get it into the strikers with quality. We're not talking about going back to the old days of lumping it, but I do think Everton should be more direct than, say, other teams that we're looking at. I think that's the principle of their club, because if you go to Goodison Park, they don't want passes along the back and 150 passes before a goal. They do want that sort of crosses, that pressure building. They want set pieces. They want the sort of game to be quicker. And I think Rafa Benitez will play that way. He's been to Valencia. You think about what he did at Liverpool, the style of play suits, but the fit just feels something just not right because of the sort of connection to Liverpool. And Rafa Benitez's words about Liverpool and his love for Liverpool is so strong. The adulation he still gets from the fans of Liverpool for what he achieved, it's just a bitter pill to have to swallow.
Bring on the Merseyside derby.
That a manager that is so suited to them has to be so connected to their major and bitter rival. So there's something about it I don't like, but I've got no doubts that Rafa Benitez, he's so experienced, he'll almost in some ways love the idea of it. I know that Steve Bruce, because he managed Sunderland, has got a similar type of issue up in Newcastle. I know it's different circumstances, but that negativity almost going into the job sometimes just bites you in the end, because once the difficult run of results come, that's when they turn a little bit quicker.
Well, on to a former Everton manager. You mentioned Steve Bruce, David Moyes, who went to Newcastle with West Ham and found himself in trouble, conceding very early on, then 2-1 down, and produced one of the results of the weekend.
We were watching part of the game up here, weren't we, on the screens, and it looked fantastic. I say a bad one for Newcastle, but West Ham last season, it was the best I've seen West Ham play for a long, long time last season. It wasn't just... it was good football. They had some really good players in behind Antonio, who's a real threat. We've seen him today miss a penalty, but we've seen him score a really good fourth goal, I think it was. With him up front and the quality in behind, whether they can nick Jesse Lingard off Manchester United in this next week or two as well will be interesting. But I like them.
It was very old-fashioned in that two players claimed the number 9 shirt for their two clubs. Callum Wilson for Newcastle scored, and Mikel Antonio was he's number 30 before, and he got the 9 and he got his goal at the end as well. Which it's quite nice to see that even with all the changes in the game, those old values still matter.
Yeah, Absolutely, and I think there was talk this morning of Varane asking for number 4 off Phil Jones at Manchester
Phil
United.
Jones didn't give it to him.
No, you're not having my shirt.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd give my shirt up either, to be fair. But looking at it, Antonio's a real threat. His energy, he suits West Ham, he suits David Moyes, because I think David Moyes, he doesn't want to play sort of, again, lots of passes. He wants that striker who can be direct, who can run the channels, but he's got a lovely blend with the 2 midfield players who've got a great presence, Rice and Souček in midfield, who I think are fantastic. Then you've got those 2 or 3 good ones in behind, and you've got this focal point up front who is a nightmare to play against. So they're a good West Ham side, and the West Ham fans missed out last season because there's this ownership issue, there's this stadium issue with West Ham, but if the team are playing well and they are giving them good results, then I think some of those issues sort of start to go away a little bit, or certainly get pushed to the back, and the fans can enjoy the football. Because when we've been to West Ham in the last few years, similar to Newcastle, I've always felt that the West Ham fans weren't connected to the ownership, they weren't connected to the stadium, and that's always a shame, I feel, in football when you have that, because we want to see great atmospheres in stadiums. We don't want to see situations where there's atmospheres that are a little bit toxic.
We should mention in passing a great start for Watford back in the Premier League by beating Aston Villa. Brighton, a great away win at Burnley, who may have some issues, didn't finish last, and they can't win at home. But we should mention definitely Leicester City, because they've given so much, winning the FA Cup, winning the Community Shield, finishing 5th the second year in a row, and Jamie Vardy on the score sheet on the first Premier League weekend.
How are they not in the Champions League? When you think what's happened in the last 2 years, you'll know this.
If they're added over the 2 years, they would be.
Well, you know the stat, don't you, that they've been in the Champions League longer and all the rest of it, and they've just fallen at the last hurdle every single last 2 seasons. And Brendan Rodgers' job there has been absolutely outstanding enough that this club, you think about this stadium, Brendan Rodgers was wanted and courted by Daniel Levy to come here, and Leicester weren't having it, and I don't think Brendan Rodgers was, because he's built something there, and they've got a great recruitment system. It's more than just that one season wonder that we call it a few years ago.
No fluke now.
No, it's no fluke. And you think about how consistent they've been now for 4 or 5, 6 years, Leicester. Vardy, Schmeichel are obviously big characters in terms of they've been a constant through that period. And he goes again. Jamie Vardy turned down Arsenal
straight after the
4 seasons
2016,
ago.
Straight after, wasn't it? I think it was straight after winning the title.
Yeah,
so
and you think of
5 years
that
ago.
decision, we said at the time, I think there was maybe a feeling that, does he lack ambition? But actually, Leicester have done brilliantly since that point. They've won the title, and he's gone on, and he's a club legend, and you can't say he's made the wrong decision. I'm sure Arsenal wish they would have got him in the end, because he would have been a spirited striker, the type that Arsenal need, with personality and character. But he comes again, Jamie Vardy. I think he'll play on for a good few years. He's so fit. He's still got that pace, that hunger, that little nasty edge that he's got to him from his non-league days, carries through to the Premier League. And it's a bite that I always felt as though if you were playing against a striker and they were nice, that you always were comfortable. But if you played against a striker who was tough, who you knew would just come again and again and again, then that was the worst feeling. And Vardy will just keep coming again, game after game, month after month, and season after season.
To finish, sum up the change in attitude from the referees and PGMO towards this new season, who've looked at Euro 2020, seen some things that were done better, and not been frightened of implementing them. And it's not just VAR, is it? It's just the flow of the game. We've seen a lot more open play, tackles not being penalised at any sort of the merest contact.
No, 2 things. I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, Martin. It's 2 things. It's not just the adaptation of VAR, which needed to happen, which I think the PGMOL got wrong 2 years ago when they felt they could do it differently than all the experience that had been built in Europe. They thought they would look at it differently, not go into the monitors, the way in which they apply different things. But they've gone back to, I think, a sensible application of VAR. Lighter touch, I think, was the words that Michael Oliver used in his interview with Jamie Carragher. And I think that's the right approach, because it was starting to turn everyone off, and the fans in particular. Even though I was persistent last season that we should stick with it, I'm glad we have, because it's not interfered with this game one little bit today, or any game that I've seen this weekend. The second part, I think, is the most important part, is that it looks like the referees are not just going to have a lighter touch on VAR, they're going to let things go. They're going to allow physicality. The refereeing, I think, in the Euros, we've always said English refereeing is the best. It's at the highest standards. But I think that maybe looking at that refereeing in the summer, I know you could argue that the best 2 referees from each country, but there was a really high standard of officiating. There was a really well-managed VAR. And it's only the first weekend, and we should be careful, because we're only one disaster away from sort of saying the referees aren't very good again. I know that that's not necessarily always the case. They're very good. But this was a brilliant weekend for referees. It was a brilliant weekend for football with the fans returning. I said during the game, the fans returning, it feels like we've got fans back, and it feels like we've got the game back. Our game has been revered around the world for being more physical, more exciting, better atmospheres in stadiums. But the last couple of years, fans not being in the stadium, soft free kicks, little things that you just think... I said it the other day, I started to doubt myself in commentary. I'm very sure, and you're very sure in commentary about, is that a foul, is that not a foul? It got to the point where I didn't have a clue whether something was a free kick or not. And when we're getting to that point where we're doubting ourselves and been part of the game for 20, 30 years and seen it at a professional level, you're thinking, it can't be right, because I'm not quite sure whether that's a free kick or not a free kick. Is that a penalty or not a penalty anymore?
Is it handball or not handball?
Is it handball, is it not handball? Is it offside or is it not offside? And you were going into games thinking, I haven't got a clue anymore. And then you pick up your social media feed after and it's 50-50. And I always think if it's 50-50 in a lot of incidents, you're thinking, the game's not right. Where it's now, it becomes a lot more sure. It's a lot more definite. And today, Anthony Taylor, the only thing I thought was strange today was when he called Lloris over to speak about Tanganga on the second occasion that he looked like he'd said to him, one more foul and you're going to get in the book. That was the only thing that I thought was strange, but everything else about Anthony Taylor today, the weekend was outstanding. It was brilliant.
You know what Lloris said? Lloris said to Anthony Taylor, do not send him off because he's going to be Gary Neville's man of the match.
Well, he was my man of the match because I have to say, we can talk about defending in my day. They used to be better. The pressure that these defenders are put under now from a one-on-one situation and a physicality point of view, the one-on-one situations that they're put in, is completely different than, I used to say one or two 1v1s a half or a game you would get against you. Tanganga's probably had about 5 in the first 10 minutes today. And to continually play like that on the edge, but not just drop off and double up. I used to sometimes say to David Beckham or whoever it was that was playing in front of me, come back and help me out, double up. That used to be the sort of tactic of dealing with a 1v1 if you were struggling against a quick winger. Now these lads play one-on-one. Mora was up the pitch in front of him, not coming back. Yes, sometimes Højbjerg or Skip would come across, but he handled Raheem Sterling and Jack Grealish in that channel with Sanchez and Højbjerg brilliantly. And I couldn't have done that on my own 20 years ago. And I was a good fullback, played for Manchester United, played for England. But what that kid did out there today was really special from a one-on-one defending point of view. So we can all sit up here and as old defenders and say they can't stop crosses anymore, they can't do this anymore. I tell you, some of these lads in the situations that they're put in, their right wingers don't come back anymore. They stay up the pitch. So they're one-on-one and they're exposed. And they're expected not just to be exposed defensively, they then got to get up the pitch and run 100 yards every time. And that's not the old overlapping fullback that used to be. It's every single time. Cancelo, Zinchenko or Mendy, every one of them are just forward. We saw Luke Shaw in the summer. And it's non-stop for them. So I'm going to give credit to Tanganga today because he did something out on that pitch that I thought was really special, which was play one-on-one against sometimes 2 players who were exceptional, going against players, dribbling against players, and he stuck at it, and that's why he won man of the match. Mora could have had it, but it was Tanganga because of that. I always like giving a right back anyway, don't I?
But today you were justified.
I was.
Thanks for your time, Gary.
Thank you, Martin.